On September 30, 2025, a plane touched the ground of Bamako, but it was not just another diplomatic flight. It was a signal that history had changed its course. General Abdourahmane Tiani stepped out. His silhouette cutting through the desert sun, carrying the weight of a nation that refused to bow. Waiting for him was General Assimi Goita, the men who embodied Mali's defiance. Together, they were not meeting as ordinary heads of state. They were symbols, heirs of centuries of resistance, now shaping a future with their own hands. This was not protocol. It was a declaration. People whispered, "Why now? Why both Bamako and Ouagadougou in one single day?" The answer was hidden in the urgency of a continent that no longer wanted to wait. The alliance of Sahel states was no longer an idea, it was becoming flesh and stone, bank and anthem, soldier and border. If you believe that Africa deserves to decide its destiny without permission from outsiders, stay with us. And before we go further, make sure to like this video and subscribe, because this story is not just news, it is the heartbeat of a new Africa. At Modibo Keita International Airport, the reception was more than ceremonial. General Assimi Goita himself welcomed General Abdourahmane Tiani with full honors. Soldiers stood in perfect formation. Flags of Mali and Niger waving together in the Sahel wind. Cameras captured not just a handshake, but a pledge. Behind closed doors, both leaders prepared for the coming summit of the Alliance of Sahel States. Scheduled in Bamako. Their task was immense, to align calendars, to reinforce joint security, to finalize the first institutions of a confederation no longer in theory but in reality. Yet the question remained, would this unity survive beyond protocol, beyond speeches? That answer would unfold not in Bamako alone, but further south in Ouagadougou. The doors of the presidential hall in Bamako closed, and silence fell. But in that silence, the weight of centuries pressed down. For generations, the Sahel had been described by outsiders as fragile, unstable, or doomed to dependence. Today, two generals sat across from each other, determined to tear those labels apart. General Abdourahmane Tiani, his uniform still marked with the dust of Niamey, spoke first. His words were not dressed in diplomatic softness. He spoke of urgency, of children in Niger forced to flee their villages, of farmers in Talabari unable to plant because of terrorist raids, of young soldiers fighting with little but courage. His voice carried the fatigue of a nation under siege, but also the stubborn refusal to surrender. General Assimi Goita listened without interruption. When he finally spoke, it was with the calm of a man who had faced storms before. "Mali," he said, "knows your wounds. We have buried our own dead, we have watched the flags of foreign armies rise above our soil. And we have chosen to take them down. What we are building here is not simply military cooperation. It is dignity restored." The two men leaned closer. On the table lay the agenda of the upcoming AES summit, an agenda that was no longer theoretical. Deadlines were to be fixed. Announcements synchronized. A calendar of sovereignty to be shared across Niamey, Bamako, and Ouagadougou. The tension was not only in the papers. It was in the question whispered by their people: could three nations scarred by coups, sanctions, and war truly bind themselves into one confederation? Or would this be another dream shattered under the weight of realpolitik?
Depuis lors, nous avons évolué dans un cadre global, en créant d'abord l'Alliance des États du Sahel le 16 septembre 2023, suivi quelques mois plus tard de la création de la Confédération États du Sahel, le 6 juillet exactement 2024 à Niamey. Entre autres objectifs ont été donnés à cette confédération, et notamment le premier pilier qui est la préoccupation de nos populations, la défense, sécurité. Deuxième pilier qui est celui de la diplomatie et un troisième pilier qui est celui du développement. À Bamako, pour essayer de faire le tour de l'horizon avec mon frère Assimi Goïta. Un tour d'horizon qui inclut bien évidemment les trois domaines que je viens de citer. Vous êtes certainement au courant, comme tous les peuples de la Confédération, de notre volonté de créer et consolider une force unifiée dont l'état-major est déjà opérationnel. Les bataillons sont constitués et seront opérationnels, si on peut dire opérationnels, puisqu'ils le sont déjà à travers des opérations bilatérales ou multilatérales que nous avons conduit, que nous avons eu à conduire, soit avec le Mali, soit avec le Burkina, ou les trois pays ensemble. Mais nous voulons aller plus loin et c'est la raison pour laquelle l'état-major dont le siège est à Niamey, et pour ce qui est de la diplomatie, vous le voyez, que ce soit aux Nations Unies ou dans toute autre rencontre d'intérêt, nos représentants gardent la même position, prennent les mêmes décisions. C'est la volonté de notre confédération et c'est en ce sens que les ministres travaillent nuit et jour. Pour le développement, vous savez que nous avons créé la Banque confédérale d'investissement et de développement. Je ne vais pas rentrer dans des détails, puisque bientôt nous allons nous retrouver une fois de plus à Bamako pour déterminer avec précision le contour du fonctionnement de cette banque. Mais sachez que déjà tout est fin prêt, qu'il s'agisse du siège ou des autres structures d'accompagnement, tout est connu d'avance, mais sera précisé, Inch'Allah, à la prochaine rencontre ici à Bamako.
If you feel the urgency of their struggle, if you believe that the courage of these leaders speaks not only for Mali or Niger but for the entire continent, then share your thoughts in the comments below. This is not merely their story, it is Africa's heartbeat. The Sahel is not a line on a map. It is a battlefield, a scar, a frontier where survival itself has been tested. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso do not need reminders of war, they live it each day. The sand carries the echoes of ambushes, the villages still bear the ashes of raids, and the families still bury their dead. If Bamako was the forge, then Ouagadougou was the fire. The same day, September 30, 2025, General Abdourahmane Tiani stepped onto Burkinabe soil, greeted not with polite applause but with thunderous chants. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, younger, sharper, and fierce in his simplicity, embraced him like a brother. The image was unmistakable. Niger and Burkina Faso were no longer two paths, they were one. The ceremony ended, but the meaning had just begun. Traoré led Tiani into the hall where discussions would not be about protocol, but about transformation. They spoke of building not only security, but a shared future that could no longer be dictated from Paris, Washington, or Brussels. The first subject was the Confederal Bank for Investment and Development (BCID). Traoré laid out the vision, a bank that would finance roads, dams, and schools without kneeling for loans from the IMF. His voice carried the impatience of a generation tired of debt traps. Tiani agreed. Our people must borrow from their brothers, not from strangers, he said. The bank was more than an institution, it was a weapon. A weapon against dependency, a shield against humiliation. But the challenges were real. How to gather the initial capital? How to ensure governance free from corruption? How to build trust when decades of colonial banking had fractured economies? These were not questions to be ignored, but questions to be answered with resolve. From finance, they turned to culture. Traoré spoke of a confederal radio, a voice that would cross borders without visas. For too long, Sahel had heard foreign accents tell African stories. Now, they would hear themselves. Music, news, debates, all carried not in the language of colonizers, but in the rhythms of Bambara, Hausa, and more. If we do not tell our story, Traoré declared, others will continue to tell it for us. Then came the anthem. A song that children in Niamey, Bamako, and Ouagadougou could sing in unison. Not French hymns, not colonial marches, but an anthem forged in the struggles of the Sahel. Choirs of young students were already rehearsing drafts. One melody rose above, drums echoing desert winds. Voices chanting of unity, defiance, and dawn. To sing it would be to remember who they were. Yet here lay the tension. Building institutions was not a matter of dreams, it required discipline, sacrifice, and persistence. Would the bank survive sanctions? Would the radio be silenced by foreign interference? Would the anthem be mocked by skeptics as naive? Each step forward was also a step into resistance.
Effectivement, aux côtés de notre frère, Son Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la Transition, pour tout d'abord remercier Son Excellence, exprimer notre gratitude, la gratitude du Conseil national pour la sauvegarde de la patrie, la gratitude du gouvernement et du peuple nigérien envers Son Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la Transition et son gouvernement, envers l'ensemble du peuple burkinabé pour les soutiens multiples et multiformes qu'ils n'ont cessé d'apporter aux frères nigériens. Vous savez que le Niger, depuis le 26 juillet 2023, s'est retrouvé dans une situation particulière. Et suite à cette situation, des pays de la CEDEAO ont décidé le 30 juillet, sans nous écouter, de nous attaquer à travers une force qu'ils auraient constituée, mais que nous sommes tous conscients que c'est une force télécommandée. Le 31 juillet, le Burkina et le Mali ont fait une déclaration conjointe suite à laquelle ils s'opposaient à toute agression contre le Niger. Et mieux encore, ils précisaient que toute agression contre le Niger sera considérée comme une agression contre le Burkina et le Mali. Cette déclaration conjointe a permis d'adoucir certaines ardeurs et d'éviter que le territoire nigérien ne se transforme en champ de bataille. La détermination était sincère, la détermination était profonde. Et face à cette détermination, les pays agresseurs ont décidé de reporter leur agression. Ça, l'ensemble du peuple nigérien et de nous-mêmes ne saurons l'oublier. Et nous sommes venus exprimer de vive voix notre gratitude à Son Excellence et au vaillant peuple burkinabé. Dans la même lancée de cette déclaration, vous vous rappelez, le 16 septembre 2023, le Burkina Faso, le Mali et le Niger ont décidé de créer l'Alliance des États du Sahel. Cette alliance est la consécration de notre détermination à arracher notre souveraineté. La souveraineté des États du Sahel. Pour que le Sahel ne soit plus une zone d'insécurité, mais une zone de prospérité pour les biens de nos peuples. À travers l'Alliance des États du Sahel, nous devons changer. Au lieu d'être, comme convenu, une alliance dans le domaine de la défense et de la sécurité, qu'elle soit plus que ça, une alliance qui assure le développement socio-économique, une prospérité assurée et garantie au vaillant peuple qui n'ont cessé de soutenir leur leader. Et ceci est un espoir que nous n'avons pas le droit de décevoir, de trahir. Et nous sommes venus également par rapport à cette nouvelle donne pour que, ensemble, nous réfléchissions pour voir comment faire de cet espoir, de ce rêve, une réalité. Le rêve à la prospérité. Le peuple du Sahel a compris que le Sahel est la terre promise et que le peuple du Sahel est déterminé à défendre cette terre promise. Et ça, malgré l'adversité, malgré l'inimité. Et ça, c'est une conviction qui nous réconforte, puisque quand le peuple prend conscience des enjeux, aucune force d'opposition ne saura le dévier de la trajectoire du développement. Et c'est cette conviction que nous sommes venus partager avec notre frère, son Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la Transition. Nous attendons le 10 décembre, si Dieu nous prête longue vie, la rencontre de la CEDEAO. Rencontre qui va décider du sort du peuple nigérien qui vit depuis bientôt 4 mois sous embargo. Nous avons sollicité une fois de plus l'accompagnement et le soutien du peuple burkinabé. Nous avons également sollicité auprès de notre frère l'érection du consulat du Niger au Burkina, précisément à Ouaga, et du consulat du Burkina à Niamey en ambassade pour mieux défendre nos intérêts communs. Enfin, vous le savez tout aussi bien que moi, le rôle que joue le Burkina pour nous faciliter l'acheminement des produits de première nécessité que certains pays veulent nous empêcher de ramener au peuple nigérien. Nous devons ne jamais l'oublier et exprimer également notre reconnaissance face aux énormes sacrifices que consentent les autorités et le vaillant peuple burkinabé pour permettre au peuple nigérien résilient également de survivre. C'est des choses qui ne peuvent s'exprimer que physiquement et de vive voix. Voilà de façon synthétique les principaux éléments qui nous ont conduits en terre des hommes intègres.
If you feel that the Sahel deserves not only soldiers but schools, not only patrols but prosperity, then write your voice in the comments. Let it be known that you stand not just for survival, but for dignity. The fire of Ouagadougou burned bright, but every flame casts a shadow. The alliance of Sahel states had proven it could dream, it could plan, it could even act. Yet behind every victory lurked a question that could not be silenced: would the AES escape one master only to kneel before another? History whispered warnings. Nations had celebrated independence before, only to discover that flags and anthems did not erase chains of finance and diplomacy. From Ghana to Congo, from Algeria to Angola, the ghosts of dependency lingered. Loans from Paris were replaced with loans from Beijing. Weapons once shipped from Washington were now shipped from Moscow. The hands that fed were different, but the hunger remained the same. For Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, the temptation was real. The war against terror drained resources daily. The need for allies was undeniable. Russia offered drones, Gulf monarchies offered billions, Turkey offered training. Each offer came wrapped in promises of respect, but also in contracts too thick to read. Could the Sahel resist the comfort of new patrons? Or was sovereignty destined to remain an unfinished sentence? In Ouagadougou, some advisors whispered urgently. Take the deals. Build quickly, let them fund the bank, let them secure the borders. Others warned, a golden chain is still a chain. The debate was fierce, not just in halls of power but in the streets. Ordinary citizens asked, will our children trade one flag for another, or will they finally stand under their own? Tiani himself carried the weight of this paradox. His army needed supplies. His villages needed aid. His people needed relief. Yet he knew every contract signed in desperation could become a noose. Traore, younger, spoke more defiantly, we will not trade one empire for another. His words rang bold, but boldness was not enough to feed a nation. This was the twist of sovereignty, it was not simply a matter of saying no to Paris. It was the discipline to say no to every outsider who demanded obedience. Even those who came as friends. True sovereignty was not forged in speeches, but in sacrifice. The AES now stood on a knife's edge. One path promised quick relief but hidden dependency. The other promised freedom, but at the cost of hardship, hunger, and struggle. Which would they choose? Could they endure the pain of independence long enough to reap its reward? Or would history repeat itself? With the Sahel becoming yet another chapter in the endless saga of dependence. Pause here. If you believe sovereignty cannot be gifted, cannot be purchased, but must be earned, even at the highest price, leave your voice below. The debate is not theirs alone. It belongs to all who dream of freedom. As the night deepened over Ouagadougou, the flames of celebration flickered. The twist of fate remained unresolved. Would AES march into the dawn of true independence, or into the arms of new masters? The answer, history insisted, would depend not on contracts, but on courage. The journey from Bamako to Ouagadougou was not measured in kilometers, but in centuries. In one day, the Sahel crossed a threshold between dependence and determination. The images of Tiani, Goita, and Traore standing together were not mere politics. They were a message: the Sahel will not be defined by outsiders, it will define itself. But the road ahead is not smooth. It will demand sacrifice, patience, and unity stronger than any border. It will demand courage to refuse chains, even when those chains shine with gold. Yet history reminds us, the nations that endure are not those that surrender comfort, but those that dare to suffer for freedom. If you believe this story matters, let it not end here. Like this video, leave your voice in the comments, and subscribe. By doing so, you are not just following a channel, you are joining a movement. Because now, the fire of sovereignty burns in the Sahel. And it is up to us, all of us, to keep that fire alive.